pushed my way off the bus and onto the pavement, and turned my head a full 360 degrees to encompass all that had once been gone. I saw people busying about their lives, as once I had done, even down to a tramp begging for money right next to a bank. It felt as if I was being given a second chance, being able to see that which is the beauty of life before it is taken away. They say that one can only really take granted for something once it has been taken away from you, and this is exactly as it felt. I felt dizzy, surrounded by all these people and all the noise that were a distant memory to me. I immediately started to run down the street. I ran down 10 or 11 different streets. At each corner I would see people, ordinary people, well people, talking about what they did yesterday, what they would do the next day, kids playing marbles on the streets, a man drinking his coffee with a cake outside a cafe. I saw the ordinary trappings of life. But then it dawned upon me. They were living their life unaware what had happened far away from them, something that was on its way to take their lives just as it had taken before. I felt a sense of great urgency to run to the center of one area and started to shout out to the people, at first a normal level, but no one listened to me. I shouted that the fog was coming. It would kill them all. They must act now before it was too late. I shouted from the top of my voice, but they just smirked and laughed. One even pushed me to the ground. Then I realized they would not believe me. How could I make them listen to something that only I knew would happen, and that no sane man could ever believe would occur? I felt there was no sense in trying to make them understand. I had to find their leader, the people in charge, and convince them, but I knew time was against me. I knew not when the fog, which I had left far away, would come to this land. I started once again to run down streets, trying to find government-looking buildings. Briefly I found a television center and tried to explain what had happened, but they laughed, holding their fat stomachs, telling me if such a thing had happened they would know about it, and yet they admitted they hadn't heard from some of their journos from the area I had been, but decided on their part to put it down to more rational reasons. I knew there were even less chance of these types of people to report the truth that I knew. They would only bring the image of carnage when it was too late, and maybe to save the lives of these people in exchange for those great images was not in truth what lied in their heart. I ran down a few more streets, crashing past people. I had no care for the flying people I left behind. I knew few scratches I left them, had no concern for what awaited them, if I could not find those that might listen to what I had to say. I finally tracked down a government building and burst my way through guards and secretaries to the meeting room where some governors met. I told them what I knew, how it happened, where to check, who to call. They looked at me with worried face, and yet they still questioned my validity. I cried out at them that they didn't have the time to balance my words over their ideas of me. It was a matter of trust, and if I were wrong, what harm could it do compared to that which would come if I were right? Listen, I felt the fog. For all I know, I might be dying. You got to listen to me, and listen carefully. It will come in waves. It will kill those first dead in the most horrific way. Then some will die in days, then some in weeks, some in months, I don't know. At the beginning I saw white flashes, felt ill, but I haven't felt the same since I visited the Scrags. But you don't need to know of me. You need to know the force that is coming will destroy everyone, and you have a chance to flee it. Maybe it's just borrowed time, who knows? I didn't get to finish my unprepared and emotional-led speech before one of the governors patted me on the shoulder and said, "You take a seat outside and let us discuss it." I felt from his insincere hand gesture that he didn't believe me. "Please, for God's sake, I'm telling you the truth. Don't make the mistake by not heeding what I've told you. It's not just the cost of your lives that are at stake here. It's thousands, millions you govern. If you don't listen, believe me, your death are only the beginning and not the end. Others will die after you until this planet will soak with man's blood, until it fades into dust and is known no more." One of the men in the background, who seemed to believe me more than the man who had met face to face with me, suddenly got agitated and banged his fist on the table, and then with horror I noticed his uniform was that of a soldier. "Then we will meet this force," he rattled out of his harsh voice box. I was marched out of the room, and in those hours that took place from my meeting to now, I imagined the general had talked to people around the country They had confirmation of some of what I had told them, yet they didn't believe that one of their centers had caused this devastation. Instead, they thought that this had been some kind of attack, someone from inside working from without. He immediately raised the nuclear alert, prepared the nuclear weapons for warm-up, ready to strike the 3 hottest targets to which he believed this had occurred. I waited in the foyer, unable to eat anything, waiting to find out what they would do with my information, when the general came out and patted me on the same shoulder the governor had, and told me I had done the right thing, and that it was now under his control, and I didn't need to worry about anything. When I tried to ask him what he was to do, he would not tell me, and instead asked 2 of his guards to escort me off the premises, which I did, kicking and screaming. "What are you going to do? Tell me!" I got no answer, and found myself, not for the first time, head down on the dusty floor. I picked myself up and brushed the dirt off my long coat that I had obtained from the foyer, left by someone I did not even know. I walked only a few minutes away from the building to see a crowd of people standing around a shop which had 5 televisions showing them the same picture. It struck me then that maybe they had known about this all along and were preparing for the right moment. Maybe they just needed confirmation. It was inconceivable to me now that people in power could be so neglectful of the truth. Was it right to hide it from the people who had elected them? In that meeting room it was filled with generals. This was no longer the elected government, but martial law. Even the television must have been self-supplied, so the programs, the news, everything, all the ways of life continued in complete bliss of what was happening. I went over to join the TV viewers to see what caused this commotion. I couldn't make out what was being said, and so pushed my way through the crowds that had entered the shop to do the very same thing I did, and heard the voice of the general ending some speech. Then I saw what looked like an aerial view from some plane. Then, in the silence, came a massive explosion that ripped the very image and then went off. The image I saw was unmistakable. It was a nuclear explosion. Then the picture faded back onto the general, who spoke again. "Let this be a lesson to those who think they can attack us and have no fear of reprisal. Our enemy is now gone. The whole continent has been destroyed by our high-class nuclear bomb. And for those who think that we will hesitate even for a moment to use a second one, think again. I have a report in my hand that shows beyond doubt that a terrorist under the name of Jeremy Harkin infiltrated a military base down south and set up a chemical weapon able to alter genetic DNA to kill a certain type of people, but he failed to assign it to the correct DNA pattern, leaving the chemical fog that was left out of this massive explosion to kill all that inhale it, some by stealth, some by length. But we survived and waited our time, while we put together a plan who to attack. Now we've taken this first step in order to revenge those that have already died from the country's sponsored attack upon our shores." I left the shop before he had finished his diatribe. I just stood there as people in the shop began to cheer. What had he done? What had he done? Launched a nuclear bomb upon an innocent continent, killing billions of people and leaving them in the same condition as the chemical bomb that had destroyed the dead city. I walked back to the government building and began to shout, "I'll be glad when the fog comes and takes your life. What have you done? Harkin was one of your men. He wasn't a terrorist. He told me what happened. You deserve to die. I wish I had never warned you. But your nuclear weapons, however strong, will not save you from the wind that is coming this way, and I pray to God that your death is the most painful." The general came out of the balcony of the building. "This man's delusional. Listen to how he speaks. The fog is gone. It is not coming. It dissipated. Have you no respect for one who has served his nation, his country, his world?" "Your world? I have no need of a world like yours. You can take it and shove it. It's worthless." "You'll be wise to watch your words, stranger." "Why? You want to nuke me as well? Do you know what you've done? All those men, women and children you've killed. They had nothing to do with this, and even if they did they all deserve to die in this way? Right now, at this minute, people would be burning to death trying to reach water, their bodies dying from within. At least what Harkin did was an accident." Before the general was able to reply to me, in the skies above us a booming sound was heard. Suddenly the clouds began to go grey and the streets went silent. I turned around to see in the background between 2 buildings the fog that carried the virus that had infected us already. I turned towards the general and began to laugh uncontrollably. "This is your fate, General. Now die, die, you rat, die in your own mess." I turned again to see the fog. In the distance it had met a few people. They instantly fell to their feet and melted. Some cried and screamed out in pain. I turned around to see the general and his men leave the building and get into an armor-plated van. I ran over and caught the general's coat. I pulled at his jacket, which broke off in my hand. I launched myself at him inside the van and pulled him out, writhing in my grip. I pushed him out in front of me, away from the van. "Now let's face this together, you and me, General. I will be your executioner. I will watch you die. Even it's my life you take with me, in respect of those billions you doomed to their death. Let this be your lesson, never to be repeated." "No, you fool," stuttered the general. "Let me go. You have no right. Get out of my way." He got up and I pushed him back down again. I used all my might despite him being a lot stronger a man than I, but my motion far outweighed his muscles and he fell down to the ground. "Get out of my way. Get out." "Shut up, you foul piece of human forming. You don't deserve these final words. Now face your death as you made those you killed face theirs. Now find your honor in death. See how precious is life when it is taken away from you. Feel it, you bastard. Feel it for all the pain you have caused man. Feel it. Feel it." The fog creeping ever further. I got up again and he pushed me. I fell straight into the van. As I did so, my jacket got caught inside the handle of the door and it closed behind me, leaving the general stranded outside. I sat there amongst his guards as we all heard his desperate cries to try and get inside the van, his fingernails scraping furiously at the metal of his van, his whimpering frustration as he could not get in. Then it stopped, silent. The fog passed over the van and began to rattle with the pressure. Then we were still. After a few hours, maybe it was more, maybe a day, it was hard to count time within that container that had saved our lives. We opened the door and stepped into the ash below us. It was then I realized I was stepping into the human remains of the general. The guards and I surveyed the area. It looked as if a bomb had hit it, and in all truth it had. A small rumble of the ground began and finished briefly, which showed the sure power of this chemical, which not just affected human DNA, but nature as well. It was still dark and grey, and a dust filled the air. In the distance we heard noises, as a few people like myself had managed to survive the initial wave of terror. The guard went and rounded them up. I sat on the dusty floor and looked about me at the city I had tried and failed to save.